Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order this special meeting in the Round Lake Area School District 116 Board of Education at the Round Lake High School Library at 6:05 p.m. on Tuesday, May the 24th, 2022. If I can, let me get started with a roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley?
Here.
Mr. Francisco?
Here.
Mr. De Vera?
Here.
Ms. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Jewett?
Here.
Mrs. Klinger?
Here.
All right, and first up on it is the presentation, so I'll give it to Dr. Mendoza and take it away.
Yeah, so thank you for carving out time in a special board meeting. There's a lot of meat in tonight's meeting, given what we're going to be talking about. We have a couple of things to go through. The first of which is just the review of our strategic planning, progress on it, opportunities, things that we're going to be focused on for next year. Talk about some of the metrics and measures in terms of our greatness indicators. And then I do think the board should talk about their interest in possibly extending the existing strategic plan for a year. Given we, I think first year of this plan, we went into kind of I think everybody knows what we were dealing with. The way we're going to do this is we've given you this information in advance. There's a lot of information here. We're not going to be reading the slides. I hope you're okay with that. I think when we go through this, there's certain things that we are going to be highlighting. And then certain members of the team, for example, maybe a couple of the data slides. Anybody that's going to come up here, I need you to go to the table and just use the mic. But again, Mary and Susan will be leading a lot of the discussion. And then I'll have some opening comments when we get to the next part of the meeting. So I'm going to pass it off. I believe teaching and learning is first.
So we just want to highlight a few of the bullet points on each of these slides. The first one that we'll look at in Theme A, Teaching and Learning, is the full implementation of vertically aligned K-12 curriculum in math, science, ELA, and social studies. To my knowledge, it's the first time that we've had a K-12 curriculum in all 4 subject areas. At least in my 20 years here, and I think probably even before that. So I think it's a huge celebration for us.
I just want to give you a little bit of context. I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but everything like flashed before my eyes. If I remember about 5 years ago, I went to the team at the high school and said, we need to kind of backward plan this curriculum into the elementary. So I know we started this in phases. We did it at the middle level, obviously started with ELA and math, and then while that was continuing on, we went back into the elementary. So it's been a multi-year process. So I just want to compliment the team on all the work that they've done over the last several years.
Yeah, we're pretty proud. I mean, it's been a journey, and the teachers have worked super hard to help write curriculum and assessments and be focused on what our students need. And so they've done a tremendous job in building this curriculum. The other part is I wanted to highlight off of this slide is our data specialist. So this is a position we have that you guys supported that'll help us gather and maintain better streams of data, not just focused on student achievement, though that is definitely a key component, but also looking at our programs, looking at whether or not we're meeting our targets on those things so that we're making sure we're continuing to spend our resources effectively and purposefully.
Would you like any questions now, or should we wait until the end?
I'm fine either way, so we can go now. Yeah.
I'm curious if in the alignment, and was that delayed due to COVID?
We actually worked on developing the curriculum even during the remote period. So we had teachers who were still working through Zoom and meeting through Zoom to continue developing the curriculum. So we paused for a little while, I think first semester, just while everyone was adjusting, and then we picked everything back up second semester to try to maintain our deadlines.
And Susan, can you just briefly talk about what aligned means? Curriculum aligned K-12, just high level.
Sure. Should probably say that we have about a 15 to 18 month process that we use to write curriculum. So it's involved. It's not like kind of slapped together. We look at the state standards, of course, and national standards if they apply. Oftentimes the state of Illinois adopts the national standards, like with social studies, so it's fine. We also look at assessments, IAR, MAP testing, SAT, to see what the strategies are that students definitely need to know. So we want to make sure that if we're going to be testing on geometry, they've learned geometry already, right? So we want to make sure in terms of alignment. And then we want to value those sort of like high leverage areas where they're sort of getting bang for their buck, where the student needs to learn it anyways for life skills, but then it also supports their success on standardized testing. So kindergarten through first grade, we have an aligned skills-based curriculum that takes students from the very beginning, right, of how to learn to read, how to learn to add, and then works all the way up to writing multi-page essays, analyzing, English literature and calculus, right? So starting in the beginning, step by step, all the way through the required learning for the state. Theme B. So what I'm going to highlight on Theme B, meeting the unique needs of learners, is the first bullet point, which is multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS. As you know, we have lots of acronyms in education. So in looking at this, what we focused on this past year is Tier 1. So Tier 1, sometimes considered universal, but they're classroom-based interventions. So when a student is a struggling learner, it's what the teacher does in addition to the initial instruction to provide support for students. So we are developing a consistent district-wide process for MTSS, which is beneficial because MTSS can potentially lead to special education identification. It doesn't have to, but it could. So having consistent process is really important, especially when we're thinking about how we're using our staff, how we're evaluating kids. We don't want Ellis to do things differently from Beach, and then in Beach you're special ed, but you're not in Ellis, right? We don't want stuff like that to happen. So we want to have consistent practices. So we took a big step forward with Tier 1 this year in having consistent practices leveraged across the district. And we also provided consistent strategies for teachers. So when they I'm not sure how to help this kid, we provided a series of strategies that they could use that were research-based. So they had a go-to, file cabinet, basically, of things they could do to support students. And the other part is Twilight Tutoring. We love this program. This is something that started in the pandemic. It's growing even outside. When kids are back in school, we're still having more and more reservations to get support. So as long as it's meeting the needs of our families, we're going to continue to run this program. All right, so Theme C is social emotional development. A couple of things I want to identify here. We have the development of K through 5 SEL practices to support the needs of students. So we went and had expectations for what we would do in kindergarten through 5th grade, develop those standards. So teachers had a set of tools and expectations of things to do support students. And that was new this year. I mean, we practiced it in the pandemic, but doing it when you're face to face, wanting to maintain that momentum, I guess. And so we were able to do that, and we want to continue to grow that as well. We continued with family communication regarding social emotional learning strategies, which I think is really important because our students, as you know, there's a teen mental health crisis across the United States. So we want to make sure we're providing support to families so that students have support whether they're in school or outside of school. And then I think a big one for us is clubs and activities ran at all levels, which helps to connect kids to other kids, to their teachers, to their school, which I think is super important, especially after the sort of loneliness, right, of the pandemic.
Okay, I can't see my computer without my glasses, but I can't see you with them. Okay, so for Theme D, Parent, Community, and School Partnerships, We have created various parent resources this year, and those were developed by a variety of different departments. And we received great feedback from parents throughout that process, specifically our PAC members. We continue to work toward the development of a pre-K through 5 partnership plan that we will be implementing in full at the pre-K through 5 level in the fall. We have developed and are just about finished with the Community Relations Manual, which is a guide for all things community relations communications. It includes things like branding expectations and communication expectations, etc. We began using a new tool for our social media posting this year called Loomly. If you recall, we just started that a couple months ago, and we do plan to bring that back in June to continue on with that program next year, which helps streamline our presence on social media. We continue to build upon our local partnerships, and one of the most exciting things I think is the additional incorporation of student agency engagement opportunities. Examples include our Action Congress work and things like the food service work, where we surveyed students and incorporated them into that pizza challenge, things like that this year.
It's me again. So with equity, we've continued to do a lot of professional development around equity, buildings, ran book studies, case studies, and had discussions, doing action, faction, and success teams, so groups of teachers signing up to participate in further professional development around equity. We've completed 10 student focus groups with the Equity Literacy Institute, and we have that data back. We just got it back recently. There's a lot to digest there, so we'll be working on looking at that data and what it means for our future planning. And then one of the big things we'll be undertaking next year is a student handbook review that's based on equity and looking at like kind of our embedded practices and things we've always done to see if we need to make any changes, especially regarding behavior, and then looking towards our restorative practices.
Just a question on the 10 student focus groups. Were those all high school, middle school, or was it a combination?
High school and middle school. I don't think we did elementary.
Is that in the plan for future?
It's probably not, because elementary students, the content of those can be not, like, maybe more challenging for the little ones. So it's not right now in the plan to look for elementary students. It's kind of like with our panorama survey, we start like kind of 3rd, 4th grade, because the younger kids, it's not really appropriate for them. So because the topics can be challenging, we have focused on middle school and high school.
Okay, theme F, I'd like to just highlight a number of things in our area. Number one is the increase in the diverse applications that we received, and just applications overall of people that are interested in applying to work in our district. We've also seen an increase in diversity of our hires, primarily at the hourly employees. We've seen a little spike in the certificated, but we need to work more to get that number up. Another big highlight for us in the operations area is, of course, the guaranteed energy savings contract that's doing a number of work-related projects in the district, ASC, EEC, Village, and the high school, which is exciting because we're seeing a lot of HVAC needs around our district. Another thing that we accomplished this year was the purchase and implementation of the Raptor Drill Management System, which not only helps manage the drills that we do and are required by the state, but also so that all of our staff can get notification if there's a lockdown in any of our buildings. So a number of our staff, like ops staff that go from building to building to building, now will know not to go into that building. And then another highlight that I think Dr. Kivens can attest to is we're doing more and more SOPs, standard operating procedures, not only for operations like our box truck, cleaning our vehicles, snow plowing, but also in the area of finance.
Also, we'd like to bring to your attention some celebrations on how we've had our money work for us, maximizing the use of our P card to get maximum rebates with some of the larger purchases. Even though they were grant funded items, we were able to purchase those with our P cards and receive significant rebates back. Also by making slight adjustments with our investment income, bringing those dollars back home here to Round Lake with State Bank of the Lakes and seeing an increase in our investments. And then certainly we want to celebrate the competitive pricing and bid structure. The board has been very supportive of approving several bids that have gone out that has really secured some lower pricing and also a competitive structure with some vendors, so we get the best quality product for certainly a very competitive price. And lastly, want to celebrate that the district under the business office area was once again awarded the the Association of School Business Officials Certificate of Excellence for Financial Accounting for fiscal 21, which was last year.
So with instructional technology, this is our staff who works with teachers to support their implementation and sort of expansion of using technology in the classroom for students. So related to what Dan does, but not exactly what Dan does. So expand and embed Canvas into daily routines, K-12. So we had Canvas in the district during the remote learning. We expanded it throughout the entire district for everybody. And we wanted to maintain the use of a learning management system as we look forward to things we'd like to continue to do in the future, and also with snow days and emergency days. And we had at Murphy, we had an emergency day this year. So this way students are always prepared and teachers are always prepared for any kind of unexpected out from the classroom. Learning can continue. So that's a big important checkbox for us. And then continuing to support building and enhancing the use of instructional technology. So this is a PD. Our instructional technology specialists work in all of our buildings and are always there to support our teachers whenever needed, to look at a lesson and say, how can I build more technology into this lesson? How can I support students? How can students have more of an interactive experience? And they support teachers in learning those things. So we'll continue that work as well.
I've got a question. It actually triggered a question from previous, the data specialist. That position, is that intent to create a dashboard to where the things we're measuring are more frequent and more current instead of waiting for the end of the month, the year that?
Yeah. So I love that question because the answer is yes. So one of the things that we really want to do better at is looking at how are we assessing student growth and student learning that isn't solely related to standardized achievement, right? There's a lot of ways. So college and career readiness indicators is something that we can use at the high school. There's multiple indicators. Students can connect on different ones. That's something we want to look at. We want to look at growth and what we call type 2 assessments, right? District assessments. So they're aligned to standards, aligned to our assessments as well. So taking a look at that, like how are students progressing in that mastery? Where are we targeting support? So we do want to build dashboards that encompass more of the whole learner rather than those sort of drop in the bucket, kind of assessments that kind of like come too late to really respond and support kids.
I do want to comment, the state is actually talking about the state assessment. We just don't think the model is great. We have our kids assessed in the spring. We can't use the data for planning over the summer because we don't get it early enough, and then it's hard to disaggregate. So the state is talking about looking at the 3-year assessment. I mean, we give MAP 3 times a year. One of the things we talked about in advocacy as part of some of the groups I've connected to is, yeah, we understand there's accountability. We're never going to go away from it. But can't you make the accountability test so that our kids don't have to spend so much time testing? You're going to get the metric. I kind of equate it to, if you want to know if students understand a math concept, it doesn't take 50 problems to figure it out. You can do it in 5, right? So from the accountability standpoint, if they can figure out a way to shorten that accountability assessment, so the IAR, then what we're hoping is they're going to give us more flexibility in terms of local assessments, in terms of other parts of accountability. We just don't want to look at one assessment, and frankly, our kids test a lot. We'd rather have them engaged in instruction than testing. I also know that the accountability piece is never going to go away, which is fine, but I think there's momentum on that. One of the downsides might be is the upcoming election, believe it or not, that affects who the state superintendent is potentially, and that's where those decisions get made. But if you kind of see, it's like this never-ending wheel of change. So just something, if I hear anything, I'll let the board know.
Okay, on the informational technology side of the house, I'd like to focus on the first highlight, which is the 5th bullet point down. We handled over 6,000 support tickets, 191 technology procurement requests, as well as 60 projects completed over the past year. The reason that's significant is 7 years ago when I started, the team was primarily focused on reactive troubleshooting, reactive fix-its. We had the best firefighters. I've said this many times. We had the best firefighters here. The minute someone called, emailed, they get in a car and drive to the building and put out the fire. That's all we could do at that point in time. We were good at it, but that's really all we had the capacity to do. Thanks to your support, we've grown over the years, and we've changed our practices so that we can now become a full-service support provider for all of our stakeholders across the district. We now have the capacity to innovate, to do projects. The 60 projects is a huge milestone in the fact that anybody can reach out to the tech team for anything they're looking to do, and a lot of this list is the projects we've done over the past year, and we're there to help them from beginning to end and deliver those projects. I'll just highlight a couple, but obviously we've done one-to-one student devices for the last 4 years. This year we obviously pivoted through Craig's leadership, and we were able to provide students the ability to buy devices out. We talked about that 4 years ago. We were able to deliver that. One of the things we're able to do is do pilots with teaching and learning. This past year we did Mastery Connect. Pilots are an important way for us to conduct trials in order to understand if it's worth going forward before we actually commit to long-term contracts. It's a very good use of our resources and over the long haul. And the last thing I'll just highlight is we also, as part of our current mindset, we actually secured funding so that we could pay for devices going into next year. We secured significant dollars through an opportunity that was provided to us last year to secure funding for over 3,000 student iPads, which will benefit the district this year and next year as well. Just wanted to highlight a few things. Thank you.
I've got a question, Dan. I must have all of them today. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of the service tickets were done by students who were part of that. There was a program where the students were. That's still going on. Where was that?
At the high school. So 4 years ago when we launched One-to-Wonder, it's good. We stood up what we call the student help desk. It's led by an instructor there. It's part of a course as well as the ability to have hands-on experience. They're still in place and they're still leading the efforts for support at the high school. We've tried to model that going forward into middle, and we'll look into doing that at elementary as well.
When you say so middle students helping
We're looking into providing that same model for other opportunities for middle school students to do that, as well as elementary school students.
Yeah, Dan, you have to move now. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it. Dan, we love you.
So in your packet was a PDF that listed our most current greatness indicators. As you recall, this was part of our strategic plan process and ways that we can measure our success in the areas of superior performance, distinctive impact, and lasting endurance. So I think we were planning on just highlighting a few from each of the theme areas. So Susan, do you want to start?
I think what I like to highlight is our really theme A. So our College of Lake County Readiness Data, which continues to be excellent compared to where we've been in the past, and over the past 5 years we've made a lot of gains achieve 91% readiness in English and 70% in math. And if you recall, those numbers used to be in the 30s. So that's substantial gains in the past 5 years. That is amazing. Our teachers have really embraced the work, and our math and English coordinators have been fantastic. The other part is the running record data, and I'm actually glad that Sarah Swanson, the kindergarten principal, is here with us, because we have had some really fantastic data on reading for our early readers, kindergarten through second grade. And I can't, this is going to sound like, I can't believe, this is amazing. Only 6% of kindergartners are still considered non-readers. That is, I've never seen data like that before. That's amazing. I mean, it could be up to 50% in the past, right, who are going to first grade. So that's how much that's improved. That's fantastic. And at our second grade level, it says 51%, but it's up to 57 now. 57% of our students are on grade level or above in second grade, and they're all within, and then it's up to 80-something% of kids who are within a, like within a grade, right? So they're so the measurement is from January and May. So the other 20%, they're in the January window instead of in the May window, so they're just slightly behind. So we're talking about almost all, right, of our second graders reading at grade level, and that is a key indicator in future success in school. So reading at grade level by third grade is a key indicator, and so we're talking about getting up to something close to 80% of our second graders. This is like a huge, huge improvement for our students, and it's going to benefit them. So our K2 teachers have just done a phenomenal job with the new reading and the writing and everything, and it's showing.
And Susan, I think that, I know this is a yes, but you may want to comment on it, but I think we've provided targeted support to those grade levels. All of the ESSER positions, interventionist support. We've got booster class sizes at Pleviac, which are smaller class sizes, so it's by design, but it's really because if we can get kids caught up quicker early, that benefits fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, and on.
So I've got a question. So awesome, right? I don't want to run too fast past that. And I'm also thinking about the third, fourth, those that were doing virtually to that.
Yeah, so our running records goes through second grade, so we don't have higher than that. We use MAP once they start to get older, and so we have MAP testing has its challenges, especially in the transition between second and third grade. But we are not seeing the fall off that we would have expected. So I think Kurt will be showing you that data coming up here in a little bit. We have a little bit of a dip, but nowhere near as bad as it could have been. So we're actually counting it as a huge win for students, because they haven't slid too far behind, right? So we'll see that in the data that Kurt's going to present. So first graders, they're the ones that were at the time maybe have the most struggle, because remember, they were in kindergarten during remote learning, and trying to learn to read for the first time during remote was a huge struggle. So our first grade teachers have had a real burden this year. They've done phenomenally, but we're going to keep track of those students. They're the ones I think who probably have the biggest hit overall, just given their age, given where they were in school. But we're aware and we're focused on them.
So I'll go next for distinctive impact. One thing that I'd like to highlight this evening that you also saw in the list was our partnership with Advocate Hospital this year through BPAC. As you know, we have really strong programming for our BPAC group each year, but in addition to the regular programming, through the support and connections that our parent liaison Maria Kulunga has, as well as our parents that are highly involved in the BPAC organization, we were able to make this connection with Advocate and the Round Lake Area Library to help support financially 10 additional sessions this year that focused on mental health and substance abuse. So we had 10 different sessions from the fall heading out. I think we finish up in June with the final one. But it just showed, that's just one example of how ongoing conversations and partnerships with different community organizations can bring about such a positive experience for our families.
Under lasting endurance, a lot of the things that were covered by Dr. Kibbens, but we have great successes in fiscal responsibility and largely due to the Board of Education and the decisions they're making. But of course, the International Award for Excellence, the annual financial report was presented to the district with no findings. We continue to present a balanced budget. We have used the business office has done a great job to find us the best pricing. So when we're purchasing our items, we're purchasing the quantities that we're doing at the best price, which means we save more money to buy more things for our children. And another big highlight is the use of the procurement cards to generate funds for our district to use.
So I'd like to highlight the greatness indicator for technology under external recognition of staff. You'll typically hear me talk about projects, processes, and people, and not in that order. So I'm pleased tonight to be talking about our staff. You've made a commitment to me and our staff to increase our personnel over the years. And this year, the recognition of our staff is a great milestone. Nikki Leach Holland started with the district 4 years ago, right after the Infinite Campus implementation. She came to the district with extensive knowledge of Infinite Campus, and that was recognized this year by her peers when she was elected to be president of Illinois Infinite Campus User Group. It's a statewide user group of all districts that are on Infinite Campus. So that's a great recognition of her expertise. Betty Hartwig, who's our project and support manager, has a passion for processes. She heads up our support organization, and she's been a delight to work with. She just earned her professional certification for PMP, or Project Management Professional. She's been the reason why we've been really focused on processes and efficiencies within our department, and we'll continue to use her current expertise within project management to continue us down that path. We've invested in project management tools, and now with her expertise, we'll be able to continue to leverage that. And last but not least, I think we're all present when Luis Cortez, our technician, was honored and awarded the 2022 Lake County Educator of the Year Award in the Educational Services Personnel category. And Luis was a graduate of this district, and he wanted to come back and serve, and did a phenomenal job and set the bar high for what technicians should look like and how they serve this district. So that's what I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here to talk a little bit about some of our student data. Dr. Center stole a little bit of my thunder early, so I have to come up with some additional good news. The first couple slides here are really just to kind of set the table to talk about, some of the difficulties that maybe Round Lake area schools face that other schools around the state do not. So if you look at our percent of low income versus the state average, I think you can see that clearly a higher percentage of our students come from low income homes. And then
Kurt, can we have Pam? I want you to explain that, because we need to explain the dip, because that's not a reflection of what is. So she'll explain why that number will be more of a reflection of what is next year. I just want her to explain it.
So one of the things we looked at when we looked at our registration process was all the information on there needed. As you know, we are a CEP district, which means our students qualify for free breakfast and free lunch through the community eligibility provision. So we had adjusted the survey, and we had adjusted what our registration process looked like. We later learned that that data was something that was integral to doing our demographics for our free and reduced lunch program, as well as for some of the other numbers we looked at in terms of title. We didn't lose any funding because of this. It was an internal adjustment that we made. However, moving forward, we've put a very robust survey in there where we'll be able to identify, and you'll see that number move. Today I received verification that we are CEP eligible for next year, and in fact our numbers have increased. So we'll be updating the Board of Education on that, and that's just additional verification on our demographics.
And it does not affect our title funding. So just wanted to make sure we highlighted that.
When you say the numbers went up, or is it versus the 2021? Is that what that's?
Yes, absolutely. So because we adjusted our survey and quite frankly removed that survey, that number does not reflect all of our population. It would just be something that we captured through federal sources, and not everyone that we have in our school district would have applied for federal resources. So that's where you're seeing that number dip. But we know moving forward, based on our new CEP numbers, that number will increase significantly.
For example, those that are enrolled in SNAP and those that are not? Got it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, again, looking at our specifics to our Round Lake area schools population, you can see how the percentage of English learners that we have in our district compares to the state. And so as we talk about the numbers of students that are reading at level, I think that's definitely an accomplishment that we want to share. So moving forward, this is our K-2 running records data. You actually saw this data earlier in the year when we had the presentation regarding English and math. We did wrap up our running records for the spring. Dr. Center was able to share the highlights from that. So I'll just move through that unless there are additional questions regarding running records. Okay, great. So this next slide represents the number of students that meet the MAP reading growth. So when they take the test in the fall, MAP provides an expected growth rate for our students. So this represents fall to spring. This is very new data. We actually just wrapped up just a couple of weeks ago. And so you can see, we talked about the dip in third grade, and that's kind of a nationwide thing, but our students are achieving or growing in a rate that they're expected to grow. So about 50% would be about what we would expect. And this is a pretty exact number. If a kid is a point or two below, which is really a minuscule amount, it doesn't necessarily register on this. And then the next slide would show our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I think 8th grade is definitely a celebration. I'm sorry, 7th grade. 7th grade is definitely a celebration, and I've never seen a number quite that high. So I think that's definitely a testament to the great work going on in our middle schools. We can move into so this is our average of growth achieved district-wide. Obviously, for 19 and 20, we don't have fall to spring data. That was the year that we went out in the spring, probably right around the time we were starting MAP testing. And then in 2021, we did attempt to do some MAP testing, but those numbers are not reliable. We had some students trying to do it from home. But if you compare 21, 22, coming out of the pandemic to our last 2 years of reliable data, you can see that we are really not far off. And I think coming out of a year and a half of remote learning, that's definitely a testament to the work that our teachers are doing around reading.
Kurt, can we go back to the percentage of students meeting MAP for the 6th, 7th, 8th grade?
Sure.
So the question I have for 7th grade, what has attributed to that number being so great? Is there something, why is this like an anomaly that we see this big spike?
We actually don't know. So we were very surprised. So typically we have 6th, 7th, 8th, right? That's the typical pattern is it goes up. 7th grade sometimes dips even. It's because 7th graders can sometimes struggle. So we were equally as surprised. We'll be looking into it, but as Kurt said, we just finished MAP testing about a couple weeks ago, so we haven't had a chance to dig in. But we're pleased and surprised. So we'll definitely try to see if we can come up with something.
And I think to support, I just want to make sure this doesn't get lost. Part of why we initially wanted to do this in June, it gives us more time to flesh through the data. But what we will do is in the fall, we'll bring a data report back to you with this information, additional running record data, and frankly, we take IAR we'll have the IAR assessment data, so we'll make sure we bring that in the fall, because if you think about it, our last regular assessment year was in 18-19. Think about that. 19-20, everything shut down. 2021, we were out. This year, we had the test. So I think we'll make sure we bring follow-up data back to the full board, but we had to move the meeting up, so.
Yeah, and for some perspective, we were like literally finishing the data as this presentation had to be uploaded. That's how new some of this data is. So we are definitely interested in what happened there, and if we can find a way to capitalize on that.
And if we can bring that in a comparison to years past, because this is, 6, 7, 8 versus.
Yeah, like Dr. Mendoza said, when we do a full-on data presentation, we'll be able to provide that. So
So one more question. In regards to the 6th, 7th, 8th, because we have the 2 middle schools, can we see this by each middle school?
we certainly could provide that data, yes.
I mean, it would be good to see this this is great as the overall, but knowing we have 2 separate middle schools, it would be great to see.
And we've done that before.
Yes, I know, yeah. So I would like to see it that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're just trying to give a snapshot tonight so we can.
I understand, just wanted to mention.
Yep. Anything else on reading? Sorry. No? Okay. So this is essentially the same type of data, just related to math. So it's our number of students achieving growth fall to spring, and you can see the charts look fairly similar. As we look at K through 5, again, then we have that dip in 3rd grade, which is nationwide. And then if we go to our 6th, 7th, and 8th, again, 7th grade is generally, as we indicated, is kind of like a staircase, and the 7th graders outperformed again. Maybe it's just a great group of 7th graders. I don't know, but we're happy. It's good data to have, right? And then again, moving into our district-wide average of students that achieve growth, we are a little bit lower than usual, but considering our circumstances, I think it's definitely positive news. If we look at our adjusted cohort graduation rate, we have been hovering in the high 80s and around 90% for the last 5 graduating classes. That held solid throughout the pandemic, and so I think that's a testament to our teaching staff and our counseling staff to really engage those students and get them across that finish line in what were some fairly difficult years.
And just want to remind the board, you should not expect to see that number go much higher than that, because a graduation rate of 90%, I remember how much time I spent trying to figure this out. But essentially what that means is literally the kids that ended the school year here, about 96% of those kids graduated. So anybody that moves away from us during their entire 4-year experience and doesn't populate in another school, we don't get a records request, and that happens, though even a freshman, they count as a non-graduate for us. So I just want to make it clear that realistically, this is really close to, it's almost, I think I've said this before, and it's not, barring some unique situation, if a student doesn't graduate at Round Lake High School and they've been with us, you kind of wonder if they actually wanted to. Our counselors work so hard, we monitor so well, we have mastery learning, we have tutoring. I mean, there's really no reason why they can't finish here. So I just wanted to, I say that every year. I think hopefully it sticks, but I just want to call that out, so.
Also, the transition students don't count as in the graduation number as well.
And to mirror, or to build upon that, I actually do review the spreadsheet with the high school team as we approach graduation every year. Most of the students that are noted as probably not going to make it come to us from other schools late in their career, severely credit deficient. So a vast majority of those students fall into that bucket. And that's not to say we don't try, but it definitely puts us behind the 8 ball in those areas. I think this is a really exciting chart. If we look at the number of AP courses that are passed, we are really, I think, we're not going to see significant growth in this area. We're at a saturation point with AP where at some point it starts to cannibalize other programming. We want to make sure our students are pursuing their interests. And, you know, we did the recent trip over to Tech Campus. And so, you know, it's important that we recognize that not every kid, AP is not the right answer for a lot of our students. But this data I would expect to hold fairly solid. And then if we go to the next slide, that does largely represent, most of our dual credit opportunities are done through Tech Campus. We are in some conversations with CLC as to how to expand those opportunities here at Round Lake High School. As you see those numbers drop, if you recall the presentation I did in the fall with Tech Campus, due to the pandemic, we did see a decreased enrollment in the 2 previous years. In 1920, because of the situation, we had a number of students that didn't complete the requirements for dual credit. They may have passed the Tech Campus class, but those requirements to get the dual credit are different. And given the remote setting at the end of the year, we had a number of students just did not wrap those things up. So I would anticipate in the next couple of years that this number continues to rise.
I think we're at the enrollment for Tech Campus. I just saw the list. We're at where we were probably in 18-19. And overall, I just saw the Tech Campus. It's the biggest enrollment we've seen countywide in 8 years probably. So that's positive. It's really positive.
So this represents our post-secondary enrollment within 12 months. Students that are enrolled somewhere in a post-secondary institution. We did see a little bit of a slide during the COVID years. However, we are in the process right now of working with an organization funded through ISB to help re-examine some of our post-secondary programming and how we're talking to kids about what their next steps will be. So I'm excited to see hopefully these numbers get back on track over the next couple of years. And then, you know, we love to roll these numbers out. We're really proud of these numbers. The percentage of students that meet our college and career readiness benchmark at CLC compared to the county, we've gone from being behind to right in line with the rest of the county in both English and the next slide represents our math data. So you can see where we have come in the last couple of years. So that's just some highlights from us for our student achievement data. Any questions?
I think we covered the greatness indicators. You can skip the next 2 slides. I do want to just briefly talk about alignment of outcomes and effort. This is a repeat slide from last year. Redundancy in the work and redundancy in the focus, both at the individual level, the school level, and the district level, we view as a positive. All those pistons should be firing at the same time. We want all of the arrows focused in the same direction. In other words, I don't want an individual administrator to be focused on growth in areas that don't support the district's vision or where we're headed. That also applies to the school. If the schools are now, I want to be very clear, all of our schools have different climates and cultures, and we want to respect that, and so that's not what I'm really talking about. It's really the programmatic and curricular focus, could be social emotional learning, with the idea that we don't want our student experiences to depend on where they go to school and which teacher they have. We want the same expectations no matter where they go to school in our school district, assuming they're at the same grade level. We align our strategic plan with building efforts and individual administrator efforts, and that's what this slide is designed to show. Other than keeping the lights on in the district and in schools, I can't think of a single thing that we work on that's not related to our strategic plan. I could be wrong, but I'm looking at the team to kind of, so it's important for me, it's important that you know that we work our plan and that's our focus the entire year, and it will always be the focus for the entire year. I really am proud. I don't think I've ever seen, not in the districts that I've worked with before, and again, it's not a criticism, but we really work the plan. We believe in it. It's multi-year. We know, nothing worth getting is easy, And we know that many of the initiatives on which we work are multi-year. So just, and to design the next slide, I mean, Susan, why don't you talk about building SIP goals, but just so when she starts going through these are all aligned to what our district focus is. So go ahead.
So this year and into next year, we took the approach of aligning our school's focus on embedding best practices consistently district-wide. Now, different buildings are in different places in implementation, so the goal allows them to focus on what their individual school needs, but the overall purpose is the same. So we have an academic goal of embedding universal instructional assessment practices, a behavioral goal of the same, and then having an equitable environment for students and focusing on making sure that students are treated with respect, that we maintain high expectations for students and staff, quite frankly, so that we can have a positive, healthy environment for kids. So again, each school has different needs underneath each of these goals, but the goals are universal for our buildings. So teaching and learning, again, moving forward, we'll have finished. I'm going to focus on phonics, and the reason is I read an article in the New York Times this weekend about balanced literacy and Lucy Culkins. Anybody see it? So balanced literacy has been a big challenge with phonics instruction for a very long time in education. It's kind of like a battle. And Lucy Culkins has been the balanced literacy person. And did you guys see this weekend? Yeah, she just stepped back. So we have a ton of research now about the importance of phonics in building reading instruction, something that we've been focused on for many years now, for the past 3-4 years in the district. And Lucy Culkins, who was against it, now just kind of stepped back and said, yeah, we got to do phonics. So it's like a huge win for phonics people, but big, huge change. So that's kind of exciting because we're finishing our phonics rollout this coming year with professional development. And I would say that it's been a good part of the reason why we have improved literacy scores at K2, for sure. So Curriculum Warehouse Atlas, this is super exciting. This is one of the things that we've had requests from for teachers, so we're glad to be finally able to implement this. This is kind of a one-stop shop for curriculum, for curricular resources, assessments that teachers will have access to and be able to go to get the things they need to do instruction on a day-to-day basis. So we'll roll that out at elementary next year, and then the following year we'll do secondary. And then I think to answer the question with regard to our building out our data pools, right, we're going to continue to work on developing visualizations for our with IT so that building administrators have more direct access to their data on a daily basis. That's one of our huge goals. Me again, sorry. Theme B. So one of the things I'm super passionate about is once we commit to something and spend money on like professional development is trying to make sure that it's actually working, that we're getting like the return on investment. So we've spent money working with special education and language learner PD over the past couple of years, especially related to our Empower grant, which is for our underperforming subgroups. And so we're going to undertake some evaluation to make sure that we are seeing those practices in classrooms on a regular basis to improve instruction for students. And something I'm also pretty excited about is we're going to put together a CBE team at the high school. Pandemic derailed some of our efforts, but in some ways also sped ahead some of them because we know that what students can do in a remote environment or a blended environment, which allows us to move forward with some ideas that then will also hopefully allow students opportunities for internships and job shadowing and potentially some service learning as well.
CBE.
Competency-based education. Yep, sorry. They just roll right off the tongue. All right, so then we have K-5, as I mentioned, SEL, so we'll be working on our 612 next year to embed SEL practices at the middle school and high school. A little bit different than what we do at elementary because of the nature of the school day, so we need to make sure we're addressing those students' need in the environment that they're in. And another one is reviewing, I mentioned this earlier, but we'll be putting together like a behavior team to review our current handbook and look at restorative practices, and this is tied to our equity initiative too. So these two things are tied together.
Okay, next up is theme D. So as you have seen, you've all seen some of our parent partnership library videos that was put together by our professional development and teaching and learning teams this year. So they've done an excellent job in getting that rolling. Next year, that baton will be passed to the communications department. However, we will be working as a team to continue the development of those videos. And we will also be having a targeted focus and telling the story from inside of the classroom. So all of those overarching important areas that have been developed within those parent partnership library videos, we'd like to show them in action inside the classroom. Additionally, one of the big things that we'll be working on this summer is the development of a central location for a parent outreach website. So right now we have lots of different resources located all over the website. We've talked about this. We want to pull them into one location, an easier spot for parents to find all the information that they need prior to the start of school. Next is the strategic plan progress. So we actually have it written into our strategic plan to share updates regularly on our progress. And that's an area that I think we can definitely improve upon. So this year we've had some conversations with our local villages, but there are other ways that we can get that information out. We'll be putting together a thorough plan and how we will do that during the next school year. One other area I'd like to highlight is the development of a communication toolkit for our district and schools. So this toolkit will really provide, we have music. We will provide just that, tools for our principals, tools for our administrators, really by month. So looking at the calendar, what types of things are happening throughout the school year so that I can assist our administrative team in getting those communications out proactively, and again, helping them develop the content that is actually being sent out to our families and staff. And then again, just resetting expectations overall for our communication, all of our communication platforms, social media, website, etc. And the last part is the development of marketing and promotional materials, not just only for the district, but also for our schools and our programs within each of those.
So we want to, with regard to equity, we're going to continue to get feedback and gather data so that we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of our staff and students as we continue forward. And then the part I mentioned previously under SEL, which is looking at restorative practices and looking at that handbook so we can make sure that our kind of things we've always done are aligned to best practices with that equity lens.
And going into next year, a couple of things that we want to do in the operations side is create and implement a staff wellness fair. We also want to develop a training, retention, and recognition system for district substitute teachers since we're taking that system back on. Continue in the Visiting International Teacher Program, which we've been able to find, I believe, 4 teachers this year. We also want to focus on our working with our local emergency management organizations for reunification to solidify our reunification sites and continue to develop platforms to get out more crisis and safety instruction out to our buildings.
So for instructional technology, want to continue a lot of the great work we've done this year with maintaining support for teachers across the building in terms of, building and expanding their use of technology in the classroom. But I also want to point out the expanded self-paced badging opportunities for staff. That's a PD opportunity that staff can engage in by choice. And because it's instructional technology, it's remote and they get to do it kind of on their own. And then as they achieve, they get to add those little pictures to their signature. And we've actually, one of our more popular badging opportunities because teachers are definitely interested in learning more and how to utilize the equipment better. So expanding that will be another win for teachers.
Looking forward, our next year starts with a number of summer initiatives. We hope supply chain willing to be able to deliver a new district-wide network refresh. Also relocate classroom phones to a standard wall-mounted location in each of the classrooms, as well as deliver enhancements for a new theater AV system, and then ultimately resolve what's been a lingering issue in the science rooms in terms of AV. Additionally, I'd just like to highlight the fact that we now, thanks to ESSER, have a cybersecurity specialist on our team. And as Craig Albers likes to remind me, the bad actors will never stop trying to get in, so we can't ever stop trying to keep them out. And so there's a new focus on cybersecurity, so we'll continue to adopt emerging technologies, tools, and practices as we look to next year. And then last but not least, I mentioned this earlier, we are focused and collaborating with TNL to deliver and integrate project management practices in existing processes. This is a real big area of opportunity for us. Embedding project management disciplines within what we do across the department will ultimately deliver better quality in the things we deliver.
Is it you, Mary? Are you covering these last few?
So as we've mentioned over the course of time, we have a number of large-scale initiatives that we have going on. Number one is we need to bring back our kindergarten students back within our district boundaries. We also have a lot of space enrollment considerations. Our transition students now can go to school a lot longer, so that means we have to relocate staff. We also have, connected to PLEVAC, is bringing, how do we bring those students back? What is our space configuration for that and the impact on our buildings? We also want to expand our early childhood center. There's grant opportunities out there, but in order to do that, we also have to relocate our central office staff. And then finally, we need to eventually leave the Village of Round Lake annex that we lease and hopefully develop the Welcome Center on our site, on one of our district sites. So the next couple slides that you see is some timelines related to each one of the initiatives that I shared with you. PLEVAC, we do need to exit by June 30th, 2024. You're gonna hear more on space enrollment impact and space configurations tonight, but that coincides with that PLEVAC timeline. Our early childhood expansion, we're hoping to make, utilize some of the grant opportunities because we do have students on waiting lists there. That gives you a timeline of hopefully an expansion by September of 2023. And the Welcome Center annex that we're currently leasing with the new Cedar Lake realignment, that part of that building will no longer exist. So we did have to, because we're still working through some of these large scale projects, we are going to have to renew the lease for a couple of years while we work through these, because we don't want to do all of these just piecemeal. We wanted to bring it together as a major initiative. The strategic plan, I think we're interested.
Yeah, so I think we've shared a lot of information. I think for me, what's really important is the accountability from the board to the leadership team. This is really designed to show you that we're continuing the work in the right areas. We're trying to do it the right way. It's aligned with best practice and leader in the field. The one thing I'd like the board to publicly discuss is if you would consider literally extending for 1 year. You don't have to, but what that would mean is next year we would be finishing the third year of the plan, and I would have to talk to the board about engaging in another comprehensive strategic planning process. I can tell you what my preference is to add a year to 1 year. We would, if that's something you would support, I would work with the team and we would try to establish draft targets for the 23-24 year. Yes, 23-24 year, we would bring that back for the board's consideration. We would update the website. And then certainly we're available now to answer any other questions you have regarding the presentation.
So 23, 24 would be the year where we would be starting to create the 24 through.
Correct. You're running two processes at once. Essentially, you're buttoning up the existing one. And frankly, there's a variety of things you could do. Doesn't mean you even have to change the mission statement. You could, I mean, there's a variety of things you could do. You can do as much as you want. You can do as little as you want. There's definitely a correlation in price regarding like how sophisticated you want to get. Like I think Heather, if my memory is correct, I really like the process we used last time because it was practical and we're using the plan. I think and all of the vendors we looked at, they're very, very good. But I think one of them was almost 40 grand, if my memory is correct. Wasn't it? 30? I do. I remember. It was expensive. But I know districts that have went with this leadership group and they're very pleased. So there's just a variety of things you could consider. We don't have to actually like define that now, but I think toward the end of next year we would.
I'm fine with extending it the year. We know why we kind of lost that year. It's the COVID year, but
I agree.
And then just remind me as well, in regards to future planning, that would actually line up with potentially putting another plan in place with what the next administration may look like. I'm really just trying to remember the years, so I apologize on that.
No, what do you?
Sorry, in the way of succession planning.
Oh, so let me think for a quick second.
Because would that put it that the
it depends on how long so in 23-24 you would have to decide how long do you run the strategic plan out. You would just have to make a decision. Do we want a 3-year? Do we want a 4-year? You could align it to what you're talking about.
That was my question. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I think we definitely understand why it's necessary and what happened. And to be fair, we navigated the currents as it was. So
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we have complete agreement from the board in regards to extending that.
Well, I really appreciate the feedback, and I just want to publicly acknowledge, I try to do this every year, I'm not great at it, but just the work of the team. I mean, we have a really talented group of people that are hardworking and committed, and, the outcome of the plan, we hit speed bumps here and there, but people are working really hard to do the right things, and so just grateful for the team and the board support. We couldn't do any of this without your support, so.
Can I ask a question? Is there something, I'm always looking for the dirt, right? I'm always looking for where's the catch? Where's the, all the, so where in what's happening or what's going on or what you're looking at, where are you concerned about? Yeah. Anybody, right?
I think one of the main things I'm concerned about, I guess, is for staff and our students, right? Just the recovery from being in a pandemic environment, the amount of stress and strain on teachers, students, parents, throughout that environment, and then just the challenges that we have of continuing to move the district forward, and which necessitates change and updating and revising. So balancing, right, that need of staff, to breathe, right, and students to feel confident and comfortable, and parents to feel able to be engaged and still manage what they have going on at home, with the needs that we have as a district to continue to move forward and improve outcomes for kids and do additional opportunities. We have amazing families, amazing kids, amazing teachers, but how far, right? Like, what's the break? That is probably my biggest area of concern. I think we have the talent to do the things we need to do, but what's the stamina given what we just went through?
I have one, and I think we, so it's very easy to find what the best practice is. I mean, Susan, you would agree, like best practices in teaching and learning
Yeah,
and how
now
to
it is.
support kids. Now it is. I mean, you can get the data. What I would say is the right thing to do isn't always the easiest. And so if you think about the systems we have in place with the teacher developed curriculum, instructional strategies that are appropriate in terms of differentiating for individual learners, meeting the kids where they are, and then you couple that with the teacher shortage. Think about the work that we have to do to onboard people to teach here, right? It's worth it, but it can be challenging. And so my worry long term is that people aren't getting into teaching as much as they would. And so that's why for us, we're constantly looking at what can we do to take care of our people? What can we do to attract the best people? What can we do to retain them, to create a good work environment? That's a very nuanced issue, but they're all connected. So to me, it's maintaining the workforce to provide continuity so that our kids get what they need is something that I'm concerned about. But that's why we have targeted work in the area of recruitment, retention, those types of things. So I guess for me, that's something that I'm always thinking about. And that applies to leaders as well. So.
So I just wanted to add, the presentation we just went to, the 21-22 wrap up next steps and the greatness indicators. You can tell there's a lot of work put into this presentation, and I just wanted you all to know that it's noted and appreciate the detail and everything that was put into it.
I wanted to second that as well.
Sounds good. If no additional questions on that, we will move on to the second component. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Mendoza.
So yeah, Susan will be driving this, so you're going to hear a lot from Dr. Center tonight. But just a couple of comments, just to highlight. We've known we need to bring our students back. We think planning early is better. It gives us more time to collect information. We don't want to rush anything. So I just want to reiterate that we're not making a recommendation. Whatever we decide won't be implemented for over 2 full school years. So it's not next year, it's not the year after that, it's the one after that. So, the team, I will tell you, I'm sure you've read this, there's a lot of work and thought put into this as well. We've been working on this as a team for weeks, like months probably. And so we know this is the first of multiple times we need to be in front of the board. We expect you to have questions. We will answer them. If we don't have the information now, we will get it and bring it back to you. So we just want to reiterate, we're not making a recommendation. At some point we had to get the information out so we could start discussing it. And so I just wanted to highlight that the purpose tonight is really to share information with you. Obviously, we can answer questions if you need anything clarified. And then, obviously, at the end, if there's things you want us to secure, we already know there's a bunch of things we need to get, like we're anticipating. And so we have that list, but anything that you would ask us for, we would go get. The other thing I want to apologize in advance is with something like this, it's a little tricky for us to know how much in the weeds you want us to get, because there's a lot of technical information in here. I think Susan is an excellent presenter. I think she's very good at knowing about the right of information. So we are not purposely glossing over everything. I think on some slides she's going to dig in more than others. But at any point in time, if you want us to stop, please ask. And we'll spend as much time as you want. So Susan, I'm going to pass it off to you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm excited to be able to present these options to you today regarding bringing our students back from Pleviac and into our in-district schools. I think everyone is excited and ready for that to happen. So, and Dr. Mendoza mentioned, we've been working on this presentation for months, but I will tell you, my team has been working with the information and the ideas and the research for almost a year. So once Dr. Mendoza laid out kind of our timeline and our goals, we don't want to wait too long. So we went ahead and we got started actually last summer, getting going on this. So hopefully that reflected to you in the presentation. And I want to reiterate, if at any time there's a question or anything, please just let me know. Heather's clicking for me, so I'll keep signaling her. All right, so this is the strategic initiative on school configuration, and we'll talk about those two options, partner schools and K-5, as we move forward. So I thought it was important when we started this presentation to basically just clarify this is the question, right? This is the question we're trying to answer. How do we bring kindergarten students back into our district? We know that we need to, but it's the how that we're focusing on. Why now? So why do we need to consider returning kindergarten students into the district? We've had them out there for 8 years now. Can we just keep going forever? You know, maybe, right? So let's talk about why we want to deal with this now. Thanks. So there are practical reasons, and the practical reasons have to do with the lease. So we entered into this lease in 2014 in order to get more space for kindergarten. We wanted to move to a full day kindergarten model. We needed additional space. We did not have the room in district. Lake Villa had vacated Pleviac, and so there was an empty school sitting not that far from us, and we said, you know what, maybe we can do something with that. So we went ahead and entered into a 10-year lease with the Lake Villa Elementary School District, and that lease, as Dr. Mendoza noted, is up in 2 years, right? So in June of 2024 is when that lease ends. So for a practical reason, the lease is going to be up. We need to think about bringing our kindergarten students back. Next, please. Thank you. The other part we have, so the Pleviac lease is definitely a big driver, but we also have declining enrollment. So this is a change from when we entered into the lease in 2014, where we had increasing enrollment. We now have declining enrollment. So the space that we have in district is starting to fit the students that we need to educate. We didn't have that in 2014, but we're headed in that direction now. And of course, we're always looking for opportunities for continuous improvement, and we do think it's an improvement to get our students back into the district, within our boundaries for their education.
I did have a question. So the decline in enrollment, when that study first came out, there was a desire to double check and make sure that it was trending the way it was forecasted. Has it been trending the way it's forecasted?
Yes, so great question. It is. So we had the initial study, then we revised the study, right? We got an updated one. And what we've seen over the past couple years at elementary and middle school is the expected declining enrollment. We're almost on track for what has been projected. The one outlier is still the high school. The high school is not declining in enrollment. Maybe they will start, but it hasn't happened yet. So the high school seems to be maintaining. We're not sure why, but we are seeing that projected decline at elementary and middle.
But the high school doesn't have any, it almost doesn't matter according to this.
Correct. So this particular discussion does not impact the secondary schools. It's primarily our kindergarten building and our grades 1 through 5 buildings now.
Okay, and then refresh my memory, when we revised it, do we include COVID possibly impacting those numbers or no?
It was revised before, so no, but what we are seeing, as I mentioned, is that we are seeing sort of on pace, right? It's not like beach is exactly what they said, but the overall trend is where they expected. And we were more worried last year that we would have an unexpected dip, but we seem to be consistent. We worried about the beginning of the year being lower and suddenly kids re-enrolling, but we seem to be on track.
Now, this question may be for a different topic, but I know that this doesn't necessarily attack the middle schools, but what are we seeing in the way of middle school enrollment and our numbers there? Because I know both of those buildings have caps as well.
Correct. So we are seeing a decline in middle school enrollment, at both middle schools. The one outlier continues to be the high school. The high school is pretty much maintaining their existing enrollment. As the middle school, if the middle school enrollment continues the process, it might jump up into the high school, right? So will the freshman class be lower? It seems to start that way, and then we get an influx of kids. So then we end up with the same enrollment.
So what I'm hearing is that it seems like somehow we're picking up in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. We've got people coming in that are choosing Round Lake High School after they've gotten done with middle school.
From what we can tell, we can't see any other reason, right? So there isn't like a school shut down and now people were coming over or something like that. We seem to be adding kids after, in high school.
Thank you.
So in looking at, again, the sort of catalyst for change, why we're looking at bringing students back and how are we going to do that, one of the things that we reflected on as a leadership team is that we have a history in Round Lake of looking at useful opportunities and innovation. So what do I mean by that? And I actually think this is important because I think you guys will all recognize this, right? We've had some situations that have been super challenging for us, and you guys are probably familiar with the, saying making lemonade from lemons. We had flooding, right, in 2 of our elementary schools, some pretty bad flooding, and we needed to redo libraries. And so we could have done the exact same libraries we had in the exact same way, but we chose that to be instead a useful opportunity, right? We took a look and we said, no, why don't we do something here and create these limitless learning commons instead of just a traditional library. And we've done that multiple times. And so I've just included some more recent examples. So pandemic, we were headed down the one-to-one pathway anyway, but the pandemic, a horrible thing, right? Definitely a lemon. But we then said, let's explore and let's add devices for kids, and then let's make sure everyone knows how to use them. So flexible furniture, this is one Dr. Mendoza brought up, right? We need to keep everyone far apart, but eventually we're going to be able to get back together. So in making an investment to keep everyone safe, let's think about the future and now a useful opportunity, right? So now we have additional funds. We can create the environments we want on the back end of the pandemic. We also have situations where we're going to make a change and we evaluate what kind of change we want to make. So when we knew we had 12 mobile classrooms at the high school, we knew we were going to get, we were moving towards a referendum. Once that referendum is passed, we needed to add classrooms to the high school. We built 27. So are we going to do 27 traditional classrooms, or should we think about it in a different way? And so we did, and we designed the Learn Labs to create a different learning environment for our students. So the whole point of this is, as we're looking at, kids are going to come back, the lease is ending, we have declining enrollment, we want to spend time investigating, right? What are the options for bringing students back, and what makes the most sense for achieving the goals of the district? Also, and I actually think, Ms. Negretti McGinley said this in the past, right? We don't always do things the way we've always done it, right? And so we do have a history of innovation in this district, in looking at our students and saying, what do our kids need? How do we help our students? How do we make sure we're meeting their needs? And making adjustments to what are maybe standard educational practices. Our students are getting the outcomes that they need, because every district is different and unique, and so evaluating what's going on, what do you need, is a critical piece of what it is that we need to do. Okay. So all that being said, we are investigating the options of how we can bring our students back into the district. So we engaged our architectural firm, STR, to complete a facility utilization study. We also, as Ms. Klingler noted, got an updated version of our enrollment study to see how our enrollment was trending. And so those two things precipitated evaluating these options. So the current configuration, just not that we're not aware, but just so everyone, right, to revisit, we have a single kindergarten building out in Lake Villa. At the end of the kindergarten year, those students transition into 5 separate grade 1 through 5 schools. So there's that one transition from kindergarten to first grade, and then they stay in that building 1st through 5th grade. Then they go to middle school, then high school. So when we were looking at, with the architectural firm, different opportunities, one of the things we considered at the time, remember this was before the pandemic, so it was a little bit of time ago, was the possibility of having 6 schools rather than just 5. So if we were going to have 6 schools, what could education look like in 6 different schools? So we had the K-5 option. We looked at the option of K2s and 3-5s, and we actually looked at the option of K3 and 4-5s, just to see like what would that look like, how did the student distribution spread, what does that mean for bringing kindergartners back. But with the declining enrollment, 6 schools really not necessary, and it's also it's cost prohibitive. So we determined that this option or these considerations were not viable. We don't have 6 elementary schools. We're not going to be building a 6th elementary school, and it really wouldn't be necessary given enrollment trends. So the other option was to consider 5 schools. That's what we have. So what do 5 schools look like? So option A, that will, as we continue through the presentation, these are the 2 options that we have for returning students to kindergarten students into the district. There's the K-5, so K-5 grades in 5 different elementary schools, or a set of what we're calling partner schools, so 2 K-2 schools, 2 3-5 schools, and 1 school within a school. So that school will function as a K-2 and a 3-5, but 1 location. I think it's important to kind of add some other constraints that we are looking at, and some of the things we probably can't do anything about, but there are some things, again, we want to consider as we're looking at these options. Currently, we have what we refer to as displaced students. So students who are displaced for a couple of different reasons. One is really something we wouldn't be able to do anything about, and that's displaced for programmatic reasons. In some cases, we have programs that have a smaller number of students, and it doesn't make sense to offer 5 different classrooms of 1 or 2 kids, so we consolidate those students into 1 location. Our Educational Life Skills program is a perfect example of that. High Needs Special Education program. It's a low number of students. It's housed at Ellis. We don't want to have 2 kids in every building. Doesn't make sense. Also probably not great for kids. So they get more, access to each other and being in those programs. So that is one that we really, the displacement really aren't able to do anything about. The other displacement happens because of enrollment often. So if you have, remember we have a contractual maximum of 29 students in a class. So 2 classes is 58. So when you get if you have 2 sections of, let's say, first grade, you get your 59th kid, that student doesn't fit in their school. So that student has to be moved to another building where they can have first grade. So that's a displacement that occurs, and we have about 30 students, so then 30 families who that has happened to this year. So that's something we want to think about. Next, please. All right, we know that our kindergarten students are sort of bused from all over the Round Lake area out to Plebiac. That's a transportation consideration. It's not like the kids farthest north are the only ones going to Plebiac. Everyone's going. So there is our transportation considerations, and one of those is the later start to the kindergarten school day in order to have the busing transport those students out to Plebiac. So again, those site-specific programs, I mentioned the ELS or the Educational Life Skills program. The lab is Learning Appropriate Behaviors. That's another small incidence program that we run in a single site. And then our newcomer students, so students who have been in the country less than 1 year, that's another program we have that is lower enrollment and will be run at a single site. So again, moving for programmatic reasons, that's not something that we could change, but we do want to consider displacement for enrollment reasons if that's something we could evaluate. All right, so 2 viable options left. That's where we're at. So option A in pictures, I guess, right? So you would have 5 K-5 buildings. Those K-5s would transition into middle school and then transition into a single high school. That's what that would look like visually. So we're just trying to represent it. And then next. This is the partner school option. There are 3 K2 schools and 3 3-5 schools. Remember, one school is a school within a school, but it functions programmatically as a K2 and a 3-5. Those schools would go then into 2 middle schools and 1 high school. Again, one set of buildings is K2, one is 3-5. So there is a transition. All right, so just a reminder, right? Taking advantage of those useful opportunities, looking at the things that we've done, recognizing that as we're looking at what we're doing, what are the benefits, what are the challenges, and just keeping all of those pieces in mind as we explore these different configurations. All right, evaluating the options. So what should we consider when looking at the 2 remaining options? That's what this section is about. So as in our decision to move out to Plebiac and entertain that lease, we had practical considerations and we had teaching and learning considerations. So we had practical considerations in that we didn't have space to do the teaching and learning consideration, which was a full day kindergarten. So we made a choice, based on that. So in looking at these, same kind of thing. What are our practical considerations and what are our teaching and learning considerations? So when we're looking at how many students we have, where can they go, when can they go there, that's the enrollment study, that's the feasibility study that STR concluded, and then looking at the timeline based on the lease and when students would move. How much does it cost? Is there any efficiency to be had? And then, so what are our opportunities and economy of scale? And I was just thinking about economy of scale is a weird thing. Last night, my son and I were home. My daughter and my husband were out at a softball game, and he's, we're talking about dinner, and he said, "What do you want for dinner?" We had a big conversation. He decided he wanted frozen pizza, so that's what he made, and he made it, and I just got to eat it. But then I thought, how much pizza am I getting? Because he's 16 and 6 foot tall, and he has a hollow leg, right? So how much pizza is left for me? And it actually made me think. Economy of scale, weirdly. So this is how I would explain it. So 2 people, 1 pizza, $20, right? So if we both split the cost of pizza, we each pay $10. But we have only 1 pizza, so limited options, and we probably are going to have leftovers because there's only 2 of us, right? But if I had 5 people and 1 pizza, then we're all paying $4. We still only have 1 option, but we probably don't have any leftovers, right? Because we ate it all. Or if same thing, if we had 5 people, 2 pizzas, now we're going to pay $40, so we're all paying $8 a piece. We're going to have more variety, but we probably are going to end up with leftovers again, right? So the economy of scale is the idea of balancing kind of all of these needs, right? So how many pizzas do we really need? How many people should be there? How much money are we each paying? And then when you kind of hit the sweet spot, that's economy of scale, right? So that's kind of one of the things we're looking at is how do we, when we bring students back, are we balancing all of those needs? Not the pizza needs, the kid needs, right? And then an impact on stakeholder. What does transportation look like? What do school start times look like? Those are all practical considerations. And then for teaching and learning, we're taking a look at, can we meet the needs of the whole learner? Are we providing appropriate support for our teachers and our staff? Are we moving towards the vision that the board set for the district? And of course, we know equity is something we're very invested in. So are we moving towards equity? Heather, it's like we did this, like we practiced for hours. It's excellent. All right, so one of the things, so aligned to that first one, looking at the enrollment projections with the space or the feasibility or usability study. In option A, which is our K-5 building, so if we take a look at the table, at the top is the name of the school and the number of available classrooms according to our space study. And then under option A, it's the number of predicted classrooms needed when we bring kindergarten back into the model. So at Beach, for example, we have 20 classrooms. We would need 20 classrooms in a K-5 setting. So Beach is fine, right? We have what we need. Ellis, 30 and 30. Indian Hill has 20. It's predicted they would need 23. Murphy has 23, predicted they would need 24. Village has 18, predicted they would need 19. So we would be at a deficit of 5 classrooms. In the partner school model, same, configuration. Beach, Ellis, Indian Hill, and Murphy look to be okay. Village would still be short 1 classroom in 24-25.
So I have a question on this slide. So obviously which option we seek or move forward with, you're talking mobiles because we're short. Those classrooms possibly?
We would have to investigate how we could accommodate students in that environment. So mobiles would be a possibility, yes.
Well, with 5 classrooms short, I can't think of how we would revamp a building for 5. 1, and if it being Village, I mean, we can't, there's really no option other than mobiles that I see unless you can tell me otherwise.
I mean, not really. I could give you an example on a low end, if you knew if the enrollment projections continue to trend in the direction that they are, and if you had a classroom or 2, you could do something like art on a cart for 1 year, right? So that the art teacher could move around the building. It is not the best scenario. It's not ideal. But if your enrollment was trending down and you were pretty sure then next year you would be okay, then the teacher would move back into the classroom the following year. So something like that could be done. But again, it gets tricky depending on the number of classrooms in a building that might be needed. This is something I felt like we want to revisit because regardless of the school configuration model, Murphy still needs an elevator and a cafeteria. And one of the challenge that I see from my lens is it can impact the programming that's available at Murphy and can make it so that they have to be different from the other schools. So again, it doesn't matter what configuration, whether it's K-5 or partner schools. If Murphy has to have more gym periods or if they have to do their lunch periods separately, it could impact their specials programming, it could impact other things. And of course, we want to make sure we're meeting the legal requirements of having an ADA accessible building. So it's just something to note and kind of keep in mind as a challenge as we consider what our options are. We know that transportation is a huge deal for families. When you have to go to work, you have to go to work and you want to know what time your kid's getting on the bus and what that's going to look like. So we spent a lot of time working with Mary and her team to talk about different options for transportation and what that could possibly look like. So in a K-5 configuration, we would use basically our current busing plan. Our kindergartners would be at their neighborhood school. They would be assigned a bus stop, assuming that they're a bus rider. They would hop on the bus and they would head off to school. Walkers and car riders, their destination is their neighborhood school. So it's a very familiar transportation model. So in order to, what we thought about, again, for parents is we don't want to disrupt kind of that overall process for parents. So we wanted to see if we could come up with anything that kind of kept stuff the same for parents. So what we came up with was this concept of shuttle buses. So for families, it would start out the same. There would still be one bus stop or one location, and then the student would shuttle from their neighborhood school to their partner school. So if parents were dropping off, they would drop off their K through 5th graders at their neighborhood school. And then the ones who were not in attendance at that school would hop on a shuttle and head over to the other school. This is similar to a plan we use for summer school. We only run summer school at Ellis. And so parents drop off their kids at their neighborhood school, and then we shuttle them over to Ellis for summer school.
Okay, so I have some questions on the shuttle.
Sure.
So using shuttle buses, we're talking about using our regular school buses.
Correct.
Though, to shuttle them. So does that add, what kind of cost does that add to our transportation? And then would we need more in our fleet to do this shuttle concept?
I can respond to that. When we put this together with Lewis, we looked at not increasing costs. So if the enrollment, stays within the same, nothing changes in that venue, we are able to do this with our current fleet and our current number of drivers, if our enrollment stays, as predicted.
But it can fluctuate, obviously, year to year.
Yeah, it could. So to predict, a number of years down the road, I'm doing looking at what we're anticipating, we should not need any more buses or drivers.
Right, we ran our numbers out with our current enrollment, thinking if it's supposed to go down from here, this is where we are.
We mapped, so we took our kids, we took the PLEVAC students and put them in the homeschools that we know of now, not knowing what our future kindergartners would be that. And we ran it out so that we gave them models that we knew would work.
So sticking with the shuttle bus concept, doing the partner school, saying Murphy and or Village are your partner schools. Murphy's my home school. I take both my kids to Murphy. Are you still able to run the same start time for those two partner schools so that I know both my kids end at the same time?
So the answer is likely yes, but this is something that we would have to work out with Earl, right? Because there is a transportation difference between one school and the other. Now, I will tell you, historically, we have had supervision in the mornings or in the afternoons. That's something we frequently do at the middle schools and at the elementary schools. So when students arrive on buses, they don't all arrive at the same time. So they enter the building. There's a set period of time for supervision before class actually starts. We historically have done that. So that is the concept we would be looking to, is providing those supervisions in the morning and the afternoon. But again, that's an Earl discussion, right? With teachers and additional supervisions and things like that. But it's not something we've never done. So the concept is known.
Okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, if I have, for example, 4 kids in 4 different schools, I have 2 elementary students, I would drop them off at one and they would just shuttle them to the other.
Correct.
Okay.
In the number of reviews that we've been looking at, did we take into account, or potentially, like with those missing classrooms, look at, is there a way that we, and again, I'm not trying to touch the third rail, so to speak, but redrawing lines in order to adjust it where maybe a certain classroom, a certain building that has more capacity, et cetera.
Yeah, so without boundaries is
Yes,
what we're
stay
talking
away
about.
from- stay away from the third
we'll
rail,
say
but
it,
yes.
yeah, boundaries. We do think that we will need to look at boundaries for either configuration because it depends on where the kindergartners live, right? So if you had, for example, 5 sections in one school, likely the neighborhood school couldn't absorb all 5. So we would have to look. Until we get closer to that point, we won't be sure, right? Because we have to see where, kind of how it all shakes out.
Thank you.
All right, just jump in if I skip you. All right, so this is about that sort of practical idea of being more efficient and more effective. Wouldn't it be great? Can we increase the opportunity and save money? Yes, right. So what are our options? All right, so this is just a comparison, and so we have several of these tables throughout this presentation. So what I am going to do is kind of just point out concepts that I think are sort of educational kind of concepts that maybe aren't common for everybody, and so then we can go from there and if you have questions regarding the table. So in taking a look at these 5 categories, you can see administration would be the same. Sections per grade level does change. The class type distribution is one of the areas I wanted to take a look at. So we have 2 different kinds of special education classrooms at the elementary schools. We have instructional special education, which is self-contained, and then we have students who are in the gen ed classroom in a co-teaching model. Every elementary school has 2 instructional classrooms, and that is something we would be able to maintain in either model. So there would be 2. The thing that is different is the number of grades being served in those 2 classrooms. So in the K-5 model, you're serving grades in 2 classrooms, K through 5. So you have a K2 and a 3-5 classroom. Which, by the way, in special education is not unusual to have multiple, grades in a room, again, because you have smaller numbers of kids. So that's not an unusual practice. And then we would still maintain 2 instructional or self-contained classrooms in the K2 building, but now you would have a K1 and a 1-2 range in those classrooms. In our dual language classrooms, we have 1 dual language classroom per grade level. Right now, we see that based on our even like projections and everything, we see that maintaining in the K-5 model, 1 per grade level. In the partner schools grade model, you would have approximately 2 dual language classrooms per grade level. Then the next section for I saw it. Yep.
Isn't it just because of the math?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. So when you condense the number of students into one area, you end up with having more dual language students in the space. That is correct.
But then do you just slide more over to the 3, 4, 5 then?
What do you mean?
Okay, so there's the dual language 1 per grade. Right, so then it ends up being, but then K1 through 2, there's 2 per grade. What about, maybe I don't understand the question. Or
All right, we can come back to it anytime. All right, so the intervention section here, we talked about MTSS earlier. Remember, multi-tiered systems of support. These are the tiers, and on a very simplistic level, tier 1 is a classroom intervention, tier 2 is a small group intervention, tier 3 is an individual intervention. That's really simplistic, but I think it serves this purpose. And then, so that would be how we would run those tiered systems of support. And then the other concept I wanted to just point out is flexible grouping, which again is kind of like education-ese, right? So this is the idea of arranging students for a purpose, right? So am I supporting students based on mastery of like these students mastered this, so I group them that way. I might group them based on the concepts learned or not yet learned. We might want to group them based on support. Sometimes you do mixed groups, right? Students who were successful, students who were not successful yet on their learning. So there's support and, peer support within those groups. So just basically different ways teachers combine students in order to support learning. That's what flexible grouping is.
I have a question. I don't know if it necessarily pertains exactly to this particular page, but I know we've talked about the wraparound effect. I think I've heard you guys say it. The 6th grade, 9th grade, there's always a little bit of issue. There seems to be a dip in 3rd grade as well. Do we have concerns that this would add to that?
Talking about transitions?
Yeah.
So transitions are always going to be a challenge, right? Because when you move students from one environment to another, I will tell you, we do have in our district, our 5th to 6th transition is bumpy, but our 8 to 9 is not. We actually don't see a dip in our 8th to 9th grade scores. That is common across the country. So we are better at transitioning from 8 to 9 than we are at 5 to 6, right? But we are working on the 5 to 6 transition. Yes, so my point is there's always a potential whenever you transition for it to be a challenge for students. Some students are fine, some students are not. But my other point is we have success and not success in transition in our district. So it would be something we would have to look at, right? And see what is the best way to support students if that was the model that was chosen. Oh, so the last one is supplies and materials, and actually if we can go to the next one. So this one is really an example of what we mean when we say supplies at 6th grade levels versus 3. So there's the best example I can think of is like computer licenses, site licenses versus student licenses. So some programs are sold based on a site license, so I pay for the school, right? So if I had in a 5-school model, I would have to buy 5 site licenses. In a partner school model, I would buy 3 because educational programs are typically geared towards our K-2 students or our 3-5 students. But if it's a per student license, it's irrelevant, right? Because then I'm just paying for the number of students we have in the district altogether. So if it's 3,000 students, it's 3,000 students. Doesn't matter what building they're in, I'm still paying for 3,000 students. So that's what we mean by supplies and materials in that specific example.
Mr. Jewett, do you want to go back to the dual question?
I went to the K-5.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Have my question.
No, perfect. All right. Just want to make sure we didn't.
Gonna blow by it either. So, all right. So in the next one, it's basically the information is the same, but it's now just looking at K-5 versus an intermediate school or a 3-5 school. So programmatically, it's the same K-5 and really 3-5 functions the same because it's the 3 grade levels. So back to the 2 instructional classrooms, 1 dual or 2 dual language classrooms. And I'm teeing you up to see.
So I'm trying to understand the logistics of
Yeah.
All right, in a K1 through 5, there's 1 dual language per grade. But in a K1 and 2, why is there 2? Because I'm like, that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That doesn't make any sense. What's the difference?
Scott, Susan, you can get into the weeds on it, but there's more kids at a grade level. There's more sections in a intermediate school. So for example, at Village, you may have 3 sections of 3rd grade, right? But in this model, you may have 5 sections or 6 sections of 3rd grade. So you're going to have more kids that need dual language support because there's more kids at that grade level. If you do the math, I don't think we're saying there's more dual sections in one than the other. It's just the disbursement. So rather than 1 at each grade level, in the K-5, there's 2 in 3 grade levels, so there's 6 and 6. It's just how they're broken down. Did I get that right, Susan?
Yeah, so one way to think about it is, right, K, so think I'm counting dual on my fingers. K, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 is my thumb, but I gotta hold this down. So that's 6 sections, right? So and that would hold across the district. So if I'm now I have 3 grade levels, I still have 6 dual language sections, but now it's 2 at 1st grade, 2 at 2nd grade, 2 at kindergarten. I'm still at 6, but now since I've got more kids of the same grade level together, I have more dual students in the bunch than I did when I had just a single grade level. Does that make sense? So think about it. If I think about it in percentages, let's say 20% of your kids. Yeah. Chris, get the manipulatives. Yeah. So if we had, no, for sure. So if you think of like, let's use easy numbers, right? So if you had 10% of your kids in a 20 kid classroom that were needing dual language services, right? Then I only had 3 classrooms. I have 60, right, students. 10% is, right? Good, right? So now I have 6 kids who need dual services. But if I have 6 classrooms, right, now I have 6 times 30 is 300, right? Now I have more, even at 10%, I suddenly have 12 kids who need services because now there's more kids. Does that make sense? Darn it, you're asking me to do math.
So Scott, think about it this way. No, but I'll give it one last shot. So if you have, no, it's fine. So think of, so in either model, the percentage of students with a need doesn't change, the percentage. So you might have 15% that need dual language support. Let's just say that's the number. In a K-5 model, if you had 3 sections at every grade level, that's 6 grade levels times 3 is 18, right? 18 sections in a K-5 school, assuming three sections at each grade level. In a 3-5 model, all things being equal, you're still gonna have 18 sections, but it's 6 at 3 grade levels, not 3 sections at 6 grade levels. No, but the span, the number of kids, the number of third graders in the 3-5 building is more than the other one. And so thus, because the percentage doesn't change, you have more kids that have that need.
Correct, you have more third.
Yeah,
Right, but you don't have the 3 to 5.
correct.
But that, because there's someplace else.
Correct, but someplace else also has 2 per grade level. Because now all the third graders from this building moved over to that building, taking the dual language needs with them. So Ms. Swanson provided one further example, if you would like it. Currently at kindergarten, we have 5 dual language sections. So if I sent them to 5 different elementary schools, I would send 1 to each school, right? Approximately, right? But if I send the kindergartners only to 3 schools, I'm gonna do 2, 2, and 1, basically. Does that make sense?
And Susan, we're not saying for this model, all things being equal, economy of scale exists. What we're saying is it's just the disbursement
Correct.
of how the sections are.
So when you started off saying it's a math problem, you're 100% correct. It totally is.
The big thing to remember is you're merging 2 schools. So the staffing, when you split the grade levels, when the staffing connected to those grade levels merge together in that new school.
Excellent. So this, again, same information on here, so I don't want to belabor the slide. It matches the K2 slide and the information. So if we can go to the next one. And so now we're going to get into the school configuration, and this is where those tables get a lot of information on them. So I thought what might be a better option for the next couple of slides is to just define those sort of education-y, jargony kind of terms, and then see if you have questions about each one. So in this one, the difference between grade level and grade band. So grade level, whenever we use that term, we're referring to a single grade. So what grade level are you in? First, right? A single grade. When we refer to grade band, we're talking about multiple grades. So in this case, a grade band for the partner school model is a K2 or a 3-5. That's what we're talking about. So it's multiple grade levels in a grade band. The other concept on here is mastery over time. This is a big push in mastery learning and competency-based education, is providing students the time that they need to be successful in mastering standards. In a K-5 model, they move grade to grade to grade. So they have a 1-year mastery span. In the grade, in the partner schools, we would look at a 3-year mastery span, again, based on grade level versus grade band. And then PLCs as mentioned in here. PLCs stands for Professional Learning Communities. That is a collaboration model that is super common across the country that we use in our district for teachers to meet together, to talk about student learning, to talk about assessments, to talk about instruction, and they meet daily, which I know you're familiar with, but that's what that PLC thing is that's up there. So I can call out things or we can ask questions. I didn't know it would be more convenient. It's just a lot of information. I didn't want to have to read the slide to you, so.
I have a quick question. Again, I don't know if this is exactly for this, but have we got feedback from like the admin and the teachers about these two plans, or are we going to do that?
We will be doing that, yes.
And everybody else will probably catch on to my question a lot faster than I did.
Well, they've got a lot of examples to pull from now, so.
With the aligned curriculum, does the mastery 1 year span, does that actually matter as much?
It's a good question, and I think potentially it's maybe a bit preference and a bit need, right? So if I'm a student who is a struggling learner, having more time to master is something that's actually really important to me. If I'm a student who is an accelerated learner, then what are my options for acceleration, right? So do we have, in a grade level scenario, do I have access to extended curriculum? Do I have access to the next grade's curriculum? Something like that, right? And then in a grade band model, those would still be the questions. But if you're looking at mastery over time, in theory, you would have access to the additional curriculum, but it does stop when the grade band stops, right? So at second grade or at fifth grade. So we can return to this if there are any other questions, but this is the grade band versus grade level. The next one is about teacher and staff support. There's a little bit more maybe in the weeds on this. So a couple of concepts I wanted to call out. One of the comments here is about distribution based on student need. So if you see class sizes may be inconsistent due to required distribution based on student learning needs, I want to explain that a little bit. So in Illinois, we have requirements in special education that no more than 30% of the of students can have an IEP. So depending on the number of students with an IEP, we have to distribute those students so that we don't exceed that 30%. So that could mean some class sizes are larger than others in order to accommodate that 30%. So that's one of the things. We also have with our language learners again, this is in that co-teaching setting, where it's not like the law, but it's good practice to not exceed 50% language learners in a classroom. So that's another area where we distribute students to try to make sure we have a good balance of language learning students with non-language learners so that we can provide an appropriate learning environment. So that can impact, depending on the number of students you have and the number of sections, it can impact the distribution. So that's what that particular statement is referring to. We also have a comment about program offerings due to, again, the ability to distribute students. So this is, I hesitate to say this now, but it's written down here, so we'll go with it's a math problem. So when we're looking at the number of sections we have, remember we have a class cap of 29. So we have a class in elementary school for 4th and 5th graders, math, advanced, what do we call it? Advanced math? Yeah. So it's an accelerated math program for students. The challenge that we face sometimes, depends on the school, is if say you only had 2 sections of 4th grade, and let's say, again, just for conceptualization, both classes were 29. Let's say you had 20 kids who qualified for advanced math. I have to now redistribute 9 students into the other class, but I can't, right? Because that would exceed that class cap, right? So now I'd be into the 30s, and so I can't distribute those kids. So then I have to make a choice. Either I don't run the advanced math class, or I have to take students who might not yet be ready for it and put them in that classroom. So that can lead to frustration. So, but you have to make a choice. So again, it's going to depend kind of like where that boundary is, how many students there are. Is it just a couple? Then we can provide appropriate support. Maybe we try it. If it's too many, maybe we don't. So that is something that we pay attention to when we're trying to offer acceleration options for students at the elementary level. The last concept on here is departmentalization. So in our effort to prepare elementary students for middle school, our 4th and 5th grade classrooms are departmentalized, which means teachers teach either only the core, right? Math. One teacher teaches math, one teacher teaches science. Depends on the size of the, like Ellis has a lot of sections, so Ellis is able to do one for math, one for science, one for social studies, one for language arts. Village is smaller, so Village splits. They might have a math science teacher and an ELA social studies teacher, but it provides the kids the opportunity to move between classes in a more contained environment before they go to middle school. So that's what departmentalization is at the elementary level. And then I need to explain the comment about equitable departmentalization versus not or less equitable departmentalization. To Scott's questions about the number of dual language sections, right now we only have one dual language section per grade level. So our dual language students actually do not get to participate in departmentalization because there's only one teacher. So that teacher still teaches all 4 subjects. They do not move class to class because there's only a single classroom. So that is again, you're balancing, what do I do? Do I keep kids, do I not do it for anybody, right? Or, you have to kind of make those choices, and that's where we are. So I just wanted to clarify that's what we're referring to in that section.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned the issue of having maybe, if they have like advanced placements and we have 29 kids and 29 kids, are you saying that for the K-5 model that would not also be an issue as much?
In the K-5 model, which is similar to what we would have now, we do have a little bit more of a challenge with that. It's not overcomeable, but again, it depends on the numbers, right? So if you have a couple of kids, you probably do push some kids up because you're like, I can support them, I can get some extra work in there, we can look at interventionists, how can we help? If it's a larger number where the support's not possible, you might not run the advanced. That doesn't mean kids can't get some support to do advanced math, it's just it wouldn't be run as a class. So you have to make that choice. Back to what we talked about, the number of sections. If I have 6 sections, I'm more balanced in numbers potentially. So pulling a few kids from each class allows me to redistribute over a greater number of sections, which probably then is better able to be balanced. Now, if you're maxed out at 29 in every classroom, then it doesn't matter, you're always maxed out. So unless you have exactly 29 kids, you're gonna be redistributing someone. But typically our class sizes are 26, 27, so it just depends. So that's kind of that economy of scale thing, right? What's the right balance? How many toppings, how many pizzas, how much leftovers do I want? Where do I arrange all of those things?
And Susan, I just want to make this statement. I know it's accurate, but just as a general rule, and I think it even applies at like the high school, when you have more, it just gives us greater scheduling flexibility in terms of, like, for example, if we had a certain AP class, whatever it is, but we only had, let's say we had 36 kids that wanted to take it. Well, what do? Do we run one of 29 and tell the other 7 they can't have it, or do we run 2 sections of 18, right? Versus like an AP Gov or like regular English sophomore. I mean, sometimes we're able to reduce a section, provide an accelerated one, and still give all the kids what they need because we have 12 sections of it. So it's just generally speaking at every level and in every district, so it's not unique to us. And generally when there's more of whatever we're talking about, it just gives us a little bit more flexibility. Is that fair?
That's 100% accurate, right? So I scheduled the high school for 9 years and we made those choices every year based on student interest, based on numbers, how many sections we had. And Dr. Mendoza's right, you often have 15, 16, 18 sections of freshman classes. So you have a lot of flexibility. When you get into unique classes, we have one class of painting, for example. How many kids are we going to require to have run painting? And if we exceed, what if we have 30 kids who want to take a class? Do we tell one kid to go, or do, like we have to figure those things out. So it's not unusual. That's why I mean, it's kind of like, what do we want for toppings? How many leftovers, right? Like that's kind of like what we're looking at.
Well, and I forgot my point. Hold on. I'm just a little I'll get back to it if I remember, but it's basically the same kind. Oh, that's the challenge of declining enrollment. Declining enrollment generally is harder to deal with than additional. I'm not saying additional enrollment isn't expensive, because it is. Then you get into buildings and staff. But in terms of navigating declining enrollment, it's always more challenging because of what we're talking about right now. Number of sections offered, staffing, how do we make it work? How do we make sure the kids get what they need? So just generally speaking, and then you run into potentially boundary issues, which is in both scenarios. So just generally declining enrollment creates more logistical, complex challenges.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, I just want to make sure I understand. The more consistent and equitable departmentalization, it's only going to be applied to 4th and 5th, though.
Correct. 4th and 5th grade are the only grades that are departmentalized.
Thank you.
Other questions on this one? All right. We can always come back. So, all right, next one is our SEL, extracurricular, instructional technology, kind of a hodgepodge of things to consider. Grade level versus grade band is on here again. So remember, grade level is a single grade. Grade band refers to that span of grades. Homeroom, aka morning meeting. This is a practice we currently have at elementary schools. Every day we start with a 15-ish minute morning meeting where teachers introduce the day, they do some SEL work and support students, see if there's any needs before they get the day going. So it's a concept that already exists. And peer mentoring, I'm sure you guys are familiar with, right? But that's kids helping kids, right? I do want to point out, I guess, one thing. If we look at the partner schools side, there's a comment about having a multi-grade or a grade band homeroom. There's a concept in education about multi-age. That is not this. So I just want to be clear. That's maybe neither here nor there here in this group, but it does matter for elementary teachers who are very familiar with that concept of multi-age, and that is not what we're referring to in this section. We're talking about building neighborhoods or learning communities inside the building. So right now, when you go to elementaries, you have a hallway that's like all first grade, second grade, third grade. The concept here is more that you would have kindergarten, first and second in the same hallway so that you can facilitate that grade band model that we were referring to. Alrighty. So this slide you can read through. The only thing is what this gentleman in the photograph is saying. That is the most important part here, which is regardless of school configuration, we are able to offer a full complement of services for our language learners and our special education students. It does not matter which option you choose. Everything can be done in both models, and I think that's critically important. Okay, so this is a wait, hold on a second. Doesn't this kind of sound a little bit familiar? Didn't we do this before? And the answer is no, not this. So if we flip to the next slide, in 2012, 2013, this was the proposed model. So it's important to remember that what was being asked about was a response to kind of No Child Left Behind and a restructuring requirement that the district had. So the proposal was what we would call a magnet school concept. So the design required families to choose among different magnet school concepts. So having a STEM school, a fine arts school, and then you could choose which one you wanted to go to, and you would be bused, whatever, depending on the location of the school. Students could actually choose different ones. So you could have a student in a STEM school, a student in a fine arts school, and that was the proposal. So it's more of a magnet schools concept. It was not implemented, but that is different from the discussion we're having today with K-5s and the partner school options.
Good question.
Yeah.
And you might have said this and I missed it. Did you say for the band which schools you would potentially identify as like, K through 2 or which partner schools would be like?
We did not.
Okay. Would that be something that like you have identified yet or something that you'd be working on?
We would work on it.
Okay.
All right, I did that one. Gotta turn my page. All right, so the other thing we thought was important, and this is kind of like going through that, didn't we do this before kind of concept. We actually have moved around grade levels in the past based on student need, based on district needs, programming, things like that, right? So way back in the day when I was in school, I'm going to venture to guess when Miss McGinley was in school, our school structure was K-6 for elementary, 7-8 for middle school, and 9-12 for high school. I went to Murphy, K through 6, then I went over to McGee for 7th and 8th grade, and then I went to the high school for 9 through 12. So that was kind of the original configuration. After I left, we made some adjustments, right? We had increasing enrollment, so our elementary schools were getting full. We added Round Lake Middle School, and we changed to having a K-5, a 6-8, and a 9-12. Then we added pre-K, and we wanted to do extended day kindergarten, and so we had to make some additional adjustments to the configuration of the elementary schools. We had pre-K, or we had kindergarten, both at the EEC and in the public library in order to have enough space for it. And then we wanted to go to a full day model, which is when we eventually looked to Pleviac and we said, okay, now kindergarten comes out there. We have 1 through 5 schools, that's 6, 8, and the 9-12. So to our knowledge, and Ms. McGinley can correct us if I'm wrong, but I think actually the only school that's never changed its grade configuration is the high school. So based on looking at that just goes back to kind of like our original question, like how do we bring kids back into the district? We've made adjustments based on what we perceive the needs to be, the district's needs to be, students, families, what worked, what our programming was going to be, going from half day to full day kindergarten. So we've done some shuffling, except at the high school, which is maybe okay in this case because their enrollment's not declining. So it works out. So that's where we are. So in summary, I'm going to read a couple of these. So it's the first time I'll actually read slides to you, and it'll be the next two. Not that you can't read, I know you can. So our K-5 schools, this K-5 model is the traditional model for educating elementary students, sends children to their neighborhood school and continues relationships that students and parents have built with administrators and teachers in the same building. Additionally, this plan has a commonly used and understood transportation component, and it keeps siblings together in grades K through 5 and eliminates transitions during the elementary school years. Partner schools, which is a grade level center model. Partner schools is more unique, less traditional instructional model. It consolidates each grade level to fewer locations, and this plan then provides flexible and more targeted services and support that reach students despite declining enrollment. Partner schools is more efficient operationally for staff, space, and instructional resources, and has fewer infrastructural needs. Partner schools also provide a developmentally appropriate 3-year mastery window for students, allowing teachers to respond to learning needs with more age-specific resource pool. Your finger starts to go numb on this button and you can't feel like you're holding it or not. All right, so there's our inspiring and empowering students to construct a thriving future. What is happening? All right, go ahead, sorry. we're going to continue to evaluate, you know, the different options. We're going to be continuing to seek feedback, looking to solve problems that arise from our various discussions with different groups. Before we move on, so these are our next steps: additional collaboration with stakeholders, as Dr. Mendoza mentioned, coming back to the board multiple times, providing updates and information. We'll be meeting with the community and talking with them about the two different options. And we've started some early preliminary discussions with Earl, but we need to expand those, and we'll have additional meetings with teachers and conversations and get feedback and information and concerns. And so it's all a bunch of questions and discussion and feedback so that we can ultimately bring that information to you and you know, look at what our options ultimately resemble. As we end up here, any additional questions?
Yeah, I have a few. So I know we have this projected declining enrollment. It would be nice to see that study again.
Absolutely.
Because while we know that, I guess I'd want to see the trajectory of that enrollment based on this configuration.
Yep.
To make sure, especially with bringing those students back, that we could meet that, or how long can we meet that need? Eventually there'll be a flux back up. What do we need to plan for in the future?
Okay.
In the shuttle model, you know, shuttle buses, because I know we've had these rumblings before about maybe doing this, and I know we said that was a concern. We have working families. I can think of my neighbors who have 4 kids who have 2 elementary, a middle school, and a high schooler. And you talk about breaking up, you know, at the 3rd and, you know, 4th and 5th grade, wherever the band is, then, you know, they'd maybe have one at Murphy and have one going to Village. So I guess I'm curious of the response to the community, how that works for them. I mean, I appreciate that we're addressing that concern and that need for them. And then again, I know Dr. Lamping talked about it, but making sure that doesn't, what the impact might be with our fleet and cost. And then,
And that's versus what their experience is today.
correct. Because you said you're going out to the community to get their feedback. Because I know that's always one of the primary concerns for our parents. You know, we're a working community. So it's either, you know, mom is taking a later start time to get the kids there, dad gets off earlier to get the kids, or, you know, vice versa. Our families make it work for their students. And then, you know, when I look at, you know, where we're short classes, depending on, you know, the band, are we potentially looking at mobiles for the district? And then, of course, the cost, and do we have the space?
Yes. I see everyone jotting down notes.
We are all writing.
See it?
Yes, we're all writing questions, so.
And, you know, then again, you bring up Murphy because of the situation with the cafeteria / gym, multi-purpose, you know, it's really a multi-purpose room. I mean, we know that's a need, and we did try to address that before. The cost was exorbitant to try to address that, but we'll have to bring that back on the list somewhere. That's all I have off the top of my head.
Could you explain the 3-year mastery window? I mean, I understand the concept, but like in the traditional model, it's like at the end of the year, is the kid ready to go to the next school, the next grade? But when you got a 3-year span, how does that work?
So some of it has to do with the structure, right? So remember I mentioned the idea of having, instead of having a single grade level in a hallway, you'd have kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, or 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the same hallway. So if we think about mastery, on average, most students achieve 1 year's worth of growth in 1 year, right? That's how our school system is set up, and that's common, right? That happens. It doesn't happen for everybody. Some people grow more, some people grow less, right? So we're looking at trying to address the needs of students who need acceleration options or need remediation or support options, right? So in the 3-year grade band with a setup that is built more like a learning community, the idea would be that students could flex within their flexible grouping to get support up and down. And if you had enough of an accelerated student, they would have access to, from a kindergartner to first grade or second grade, because all those students are clustered together in the various hallways. And the same thing would be true of a second grader who might need support because they're mastering first grade standards still. How do we help them, right? So creating an environment where there's more ability to move, so that they do have a full 3 years to master. Now, again, most kids, most of the time, do 1 year at a time, right? Kindergarten does kindergarten, first grade does first grade. But we do have enough students, and you see that in our number of students who are meeting their growth targets, number of students who are, percentage of students who are at grade level, right, in our map data and stuff of where we do have a need to provide additional support. That doesn't mean there isn't support in K-5, it just looks a little different.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna just highlight is if we had a student going from first to second, we don't want the implication to be they wouldn't get supported in second grade because the year was over. I mean, we provide support now. So just.
Correct. In our current 1-5s, we do have support for students who are struggling.
Okay, I have a question, and this is silly, but I would be remiss if I did not ask. When we were considering the options, did we ever like conjecture about what we would be like if we did like a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th? Or is it just constraints do not allow that?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. My team will try anything, right? So they'll throw everything on the wall and kind of see like what sticks and what looks good. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th is not possible due to size, right? Like our middle schools aren't big enough to hold 4 grade levels. So it's kind of like you think about it and you go, it doesn't fit, right? So then you get stuck by the fact that the building's too small. So, yeah.
And then just to follow up on that one, the consideration of potentially looking, again, we've had all the different fluctuations. Needless to say, we're not going to change the high school from a 9, 10, 11, 12. We're not going to go back to the 60s and 50s with a true junior high where it's a 3-year high school just because IHSA considerations. But the potential of looking at just having middle schools be a 7-8 configuration, potentially looking at elementaries to continue hosting the 6.
So that would, again, that's going to depend on enrollment. Right now, we could not hold K-6 in an elementary building. It wouldn't fit. With continued declining enrollment, will just fit the kindergarten for a K-5 building. But again, that's, I think it's important to always be looking. That's this concept of continuous improvement, right? We always should be looking for what's the best option to meet the needs of the community, meet the needs of the district, meet the needs of the students. We should always be doing that. So as time progresses and enrollment fluctuates and, we should always be reassessing.
Thank you.
And I think it's important for us that we try to implement a solution that is, it's all relative, but sustaining, because we don't want to do 2 years and now we have to change configurations again. And frankly, I can't even believe that our kids have been at PLVAC for 8 years, but that was a 10-year stretch. We did it. It wasn't, people have adjusted, but I mean, we're on year 8 of that, so.
And I'll go ahead and throw out the question I constantly have. In looking at all of this, is this potentially the right time for us to start looking at start time changes when it comes to high school start times, middle school start times, elementary school start times, starting to move that maybe back later into the day. Again, having had a child in the middle schools where they're in that building at 7:15 in the morning, it's crazy to think.
So I think the short answer is yes, right, depending on conditions. And that's maybe a little bit reflective of what I said earlier when Mr. Jewett asked about kind of big concerns. when is, like, should we consider it? Yes. When is the time? What does it look like? Who does it impact? All those things have to be considered, but the research is pretty clear. So it's definitely worth thinking about without a doubt.
And I think when you talk about start times, there's like two buckets. Keep the existing sequence of which level goes first, second, third, but just change the times. Or the bigger one is, do you change the sequence? Do you have middle school kids going later than elementary? Right? I mean, that's really what it is. And frankly, there's arguments for both. That would be something, should we consider that? I think community feedback would be really important. There is no debate as with what you're saying and what you're saying. Our kids, our secondary kids, definitely the middle school are probably going to school too early. High school is a little bit challenging because we have 9 periods and we get value out of the 9 periods. Some of the other school districts that have said, okay, our middle schoolers are starting at 7:30 and ending at 2. We're just going to go 8:30 and end at 3. Ours is a little bit different because we have an extra period. So if you really think about it, if we shifted, we could theoretically be done at 4. Like on or around, now you run into issues with other schools. It's not insurmountable, so I just want to be clear. But I think we're going to get information on as part of this and vet it out a little bit.
It's just an observation. It seems that the second model potentially addresses the challenge of managing a decreasing enrollment with needing support for a potentially strained educational workforce. In other words, your concern in terms of staffing and so on, the second model seems to offer more flexibility and support because it is a community model.
And it's in there, it's economies of scale. If you have larger grade levels in terms of staffing and operationally, you can run it a little more efficiently. So, I mean, that's true. So I've been writing down information. Jennifer, Scott, Michael, Annette. I just want to make sure, Kevin, I've been taking notes the entire time. I just want to know, other than what you've asked us to secure, so you gave us several things. Michael, you asked about a few things. Jennifer, you've asked a few questions about. I just want to make sure we leave here and we're able to get more information. We plan on, now that we had to get this out there, so at least now we can start moving in additional work. But we are definitely going to engage the community. My plan would be to have Heather develop a communication plan, a collaboration plan, different methods of seeking input. That would be certainly brought back to the board. We need to come back to the board again, even separate from that, to give you additional information. We also plan on, working in lockstep with Earl to problem solve and to address any issues, potentially even initially in both models. There's some information on mobiles we need to get. So I just want to make sure we leave with the question. You may have more to like tomorrow, which is great. If you have more questions, what I ask is you send those to Heather directly or me. And then we'll start compiling them and get answers. And what I would do is, if you send one to me, I would probably just let the full board know that, hey, I got this question from a board member. And then when we come back, so that's kind of how this process is going to work. It's a multi-level, multi-step process of just constant communication and kind of working through it. So
I do have one last question. With the integration of moving our students back from PLEVAC into the district, is there an increase or decrease in staffing that will happen?
So I think generally speaking, we need to, in either model, look at staffing levels and see what it kind of looks like. Now, I just want to say this because Susan knows Susan's probably the best scheduler we have in the district. I never touched it at the high school because I didn't want, staffing is fluid, right? It's based on enrollment. We're doing math problems based on projections, but we'll do our best to kind of look at staffing for either model and figure out what that looks like. No matter what happens, the other staffing component is how do people move? It's not just the number, but when students come back from PLEVIAC, where do the teachers go? How's that decided? What does it look like? What is communication like? What are the ratios? That has to happen in either model. So it's staffing is probably on Susan's list somewhere with a big circle around it.
Well, I'm sure, but I think as a board, it's a question we need to ask. And I'm sure that you will, but I just want to make sure it's articulated and noted.
It
is a question we will ask, and it should be discussed.
Don's right, that is definitely on my list with multiple circles around it. It's highlighted because we definitely want to do what's best for our teachers and what's best for our kids. And enrollment obviously plays a big part of that as well. So
This is actually going to happen right at the same time as the new strategic plan.
based on your timing from this meeting, yes.
Yeah, I think what I would say. No. I mean, we frankly, what I appreciate is we built in facility and projection information as part of our strategic plan. But even if it expired after next year, we got to get our kids back from PLEVIAC. It just keeps a light on it, which I agree with Ms. Bennett's going to be really, really, really busy.
Will help, Heather.
And again, I just want to thank the board for spending this much time, but I think you can understand now why we needed a special meeting. I appreciate you carving out the time. It's really important. And, no matter where we end, I just want to thank the team for all of the work they put into this. I hope, regardless of where we end up, I hope as a board you can see we're trying to be really thoughtful with all the variables and how to solve for things and I want to thank the team. It's been a long time and we have a lot of more work to do, but it's good work you put into it up to this point.
I was just gonna add, I know you guys provided a lot of, the indicators, the greatness indicators. I don't know if everyone read the white paper that Dr. Center contributed on. I don't know if you read it, but it's a really good read. I recommend if you haven't to do it.
We can send it to you. We have an electronic copy, don't we?
There's the link.
Oh, is the link in there?
Yeah.
The link is in there. Awesome.
Yeah. So if you haven't read it, I do recommend it. It is really good. So I did want to commend you on that.
Thank you. I always love highlighting what our district is doing, so. Great, well, thanks for listening to me for a very long time tonight. I will return to my seat.
All right, next up, we have the discussion on a procedural review for electronic public comment. What's that gonna, yep. Take it away, Ms. Bennett.
Okay, so you may recall at the last regular board meeting, we briefly discussed the potential need to revisit our procedure on accepting electronic public comments. So a little bit of background reminder, back when we needed to move to remote or virtual meetings for board meetings, we did change our procedure to allow for electronic public comments rather than, obviously nobody could come in person. When we returned to the in-person meeting structure, we continue to allow that practice. So now that we are essentially back to what is normal, I think, and community members do have ample opportunity to come into board meetings to make a public comment, our recommendation is that we move back to our original process. Board Policy 2230, Public Participation at Board of Education Meetings, states that petitions or written correspondence to the board shall be presented to the board in the next regular board packet. So we would recommend not only moving back to the old structure, but continuing to allow the electronic public comment, but not be read at an actual board meeting. We would accept those. I would then contact the individual to verify identity, because that is actually required as part of public comment. And then we would provide that information to the board in written form. So just wanted to bring it to the board today for consideration. And if everybody is open to that option, we'll adjust our procedure online and move back to our original process with a revised option for that electronic public comment form in written method.
And as clarification, we vetted that through legal as well, correct?
Yes, we did.
And then ultimately, really what we're talking about doing is just kind of tightening up the window for when the submissions can be done. That it would tighten it up to earlier in the day, so to speak. And then it would just be electronically presented to the board and then also put into the notes.
Yes, we could, if we follow exactly as board policy says, we'll provide it as part of the board packet, the next board packet. So I think the timeline that we put into it is a 12 o'clock noon cutoff. That would give us time to contact the submitter to verify identity, and then potentially that evening be able to have that into your board packet. If I cannot identify the individual before that time, then we'll put it into the next packet. If things are time sensitive, of course, we can always bring that forward to the board in some sort of weekly communication that we always put out anyway.
Thank you.
So if I go to submit public comment and it's 12:01, will I see something that tells me I've missed the cutoff?
No, not necessarily. However, we'll write into the process, which is on the form that they submit, about the timelines. And
Okay.
when I receive them, it shows the date and time stamp that it was submitted.
But I would want to see those if I'm submitting public comment. Like, oh, okay, I know I missed the cutoff.
You
I'll
just
check
lock the
into that
page
option.
down or anything afternoon? I mean, couldn't they lock the page down at some point?
We could, so with a Google form, there is like once you submit, there is some sort of message that I think can be customized. So I'll check into that.
Just that it'd be good for the submitter if they know, oops,
I missed it.
it's 12:02. I know I'm not making this board meeting.
And then also to that point, having clarification that if identity cannot be verified, that you're still not going to make the meeting, even if I sent it at 11:59. But if identity can't be verified, that it's being explained that way. Any additional questions from the board?
Has this ever been a practice before in the past? Not that I recall being
we've-
here, but no.
No, we've never allowed the electronic public comments until we had the
Right.
pandemic.
Okay. I'd just be curious to see that the value in it, if you get an influx, how much of her time is spent following up versus the value of them just being required to show up.
Well, how many electronic public comments, to that question, how many do we usually gather? I know I don't have a spreadsheet on it, but it's few and far between of even we're having them. Most of the time I'm asking you, you're saying no, and we're moving on to local public comment.
Unless it's a polarizing subject, at which point it could be potentially hours of your time.
Right. So if you think back to our return to school plan, those were heavier at that time, but since that, very few and far between.
Any objections to the adjustment as recommended by the administration?
No, and then revisit maybe start of the year or something like that.
But do keep us posted. Yeah, I was just gonna say no, but with a caveat.
All right, I think we have a process to move through. All right, then next up is actual opportunity for public comment. And we're still following the old process at this point, so members of the public may participate in public comment during regular board meetings or special board meetings by attending in person or by submitting an electronic public comment form. Please note that in all instances, speakers are limited to 3 minutes. A link to the public comment form can be found in the online board packet, and electronic public comments will be accepted up until now-ish. Did we have any electronic public comment?
We do not.
All right. Do we have any local public comment? Anyone would like to stand up and speak? No? No? All right. Well, hearing no local public comment, then I will now call this meeting adjourned at 8:48 p.m. Thank you.